Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to What is America to You. I'm your host, Derek Dempsey, and we're coming at you from a very windy and rainy New York. Look out the window here. And when I say we, I mean me and Jessica. So, thanks. Before we get to our next guest, thank you for the comments on, especially from Karen, my sister-in-law, and Sam in London. I think it's not London, it's England, somewhere in England. I always think London is England. Also, we got loads of thumbs up. We got, hundreds of people subscribing, but not yet to the billions that we wish to get to. And please keep on sharing the video. We really need it. We need to reach up to 500 and then 1,000 subscribers. Anyway, our next guest is singer, band leader, television presenter, songwriter, producer, and actress. She has been nominated for an Emmy for her composition on a beautiful lullaby composition, Moon and Back. She had 6 top 100 hits in the early to mid 80s, several of them breaking into the top 10, which led to her many appearances on Top of the Pops, where myself and my peers discovered her. And of course, Friday morning, we discussed how great she was and her amazing Beehive and how different she was. She also appeared with Boy George in the musical Taboo. And for me personally, she's one of the few people on the planet to sing the word plebeian in a song. And I'm hoping she maybe will cover the Man in the Looking Glass and be even in a smaller group of people who sing the word sacroiliac. But we'll find out that when we introduce you to her. She sang the theme song of Mike Newell's movie Dance with a Stranger and the theme song for a sitcom Coupling, huge programme. Perhaps. She performed Dusty in Dusty the Musical, Dusty Springfield, and the one-woman musical she wrote and starred in, The Love Thing. She sang with Brian Ferry, Mark Almond, Boy George, Roy Wood, and has been closely associated with Stan Getz, Dave Stewart, B.B. King, and Ray Charles. However, for us today, the most important thing is that our next guest is our first female guest. Yeah, finally! So without further ado, we would like to introduce to you our next guest, Mary Wilson. Welcome to What is America to You. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh,
yeah, great.
Pleasure to have you. An honour and a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now, as I was saying earlier on about Top of the Pops, I know you would have been somebody who watched Top of the Pops back in when you were a teenager. So to appear on Top of the Pops was a huge thing. And let me ask you, I read once George Michael said when he got to the studio, what struck him was how small the studio was. Was it really that small?
Yeah, it was quite small. Yeah. But it was all in the round, So there were usually, I think, about 3 bands on each stage. So one would be performing and the other 2 would be waiting to be cued because after they'd finished, you'd be on, And yeah, but it was so exciting. The first time I went on there, it was, I tell you, it was just fantastic. And also I just felt like, yeah, this is exactly what I had in mind. I've been planning this all my life. And I often think, well, if I hadn't made it as a singer, if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be able to say that. But because I was, not long before it all happened, I was working in an office, we all had to make a living somehow. And I used to sit there thinking, well, this isn't right. What am I doing in front of a bloody typewriter? I'm meant to be on Top of the Pops. And then eventually it happened and you kind of get there and you think, yeah, this is exactly what I was expecting,
Almost like a destiny.
Yeah. I mean, because it was so, I suppose in America, Soul Train maybe, or what was the other one? Casey Kasem.
Oh, American Bandstand?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it was so important. If you were on Top of the Pops, if you were on Top of the Pops, you pretty much know you've got a hit record. And to have a hit record then, now you've only got to sell 10 copies to get to number 1,
Don't start me on now.
I'm always telling the story of T-Rex Ride a White Swan, which sold 350,000 copies and only got to number 3.
Wow.
So it shows you the difference back then. That was before my time. That was the 70s. Mine was the 80s. But it just showed you had to sell a lot of records,
Yeah.
It's not quite the same now, but that's another story.
No, we may get to, because, as I say, don't get me started on today's music. As I said earlier, after Stock Aitken and Waterman, the Crimes, and then of course came what's his name, Simon Cowell. And maybe, I don't know whether you know Simon Cowell or not, but what he's.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Me neither. Thank you. I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I say he's finally done to his face what he did to music over the last 20 years. Absolutely destroyed it. But I want to say to you, Mary, that, and this is my fandom coming out here. I was in school at the time, so I would have been, 13, 14. When I was in school, I mostly was on the hop. I hated school. I would go on the bounce, or whatever they call it. But there were two friends I had in school, Mick Noble, who now lives in Australia, and Paddy McGee, who I don't know where he lives. But we would come in the next morning. Huh?
Paddy McGee, you couldn't make that up.
I know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how, but he was one of the happiest guys. He loved Buster Blood Vessel and all the scam music. So he naturally gravitated towards you and your image in the Beehive and the whole 60s girl band looks. The next morning he's like, oh man, she's gorgeous. He was crazy about you. Mick Noble loved the singer from Yazoo, Alison Moyet. So he related to you two. And I was just talking to him, telling him we were interviewing you, so he'd be listening here. So we were talking the next day in school about you. And I always find it funny that, here we are now, like, chatting on Skype years later. So it's a little bit of the fandom in me coming out. And I'll try to remain professional from here on in.
Oh, that's all right.
But, and you still look fabulous. You really do.
Well, thank you. It's makeup. It's makeup, Derek, basically. Makeup and not too much light on my face. That always works.
Me too. I use I have a bit of makeup on, covering me up. But okay, so I recently became an American citizen, and the reason why I say that to you is I bought your album Cover Stories, and I hadn't heard of its release, but through interviewing Ron Sexsmith, I was looking him up and I saw this cover, and I'm like, that's Mary Wilson covering it. Right about now, and I said this to you in an email. I love your phrasing. You're a real soul jazz phraser, and it's not by mistake you do these things. And I love that phrase where you go, and the wind is blowing its weight around. How you just singing? Do you approach the phrasing in a song? Does it come naturally, or do you look at certain lyrics and approach them a certain way?
You know what? I think it just sort of comes naturally. But I have to say that and we may get to this later, but when I left the record industry, if you like, which was about 1986, I acquired a new agent who was a jazz agent. He was Ronnie Scott's agent, and he put all the bands on in Ronnie Scott's club. Ronnie Scott's for those who don't know, is a very famous jazz club in London. It's been there since 1957. And Ronnie Scott was still alive at the time and also working there a lot, and would introduce the band. He was hilarious. And he said, I did a couple of TV things, and a couple of people said to me when I sang, I had to sing a Sammy Kahn song, and when I did Cry Me a River and things like that, people said, you should do jazz. You're a bit of a jazz singer. And I've never really thought about it, because although I loved people like Peggy Lee and Frank Sinatra and stuff like that, and Julie London, of course, I wasn't aware that they were classed as jazz singers, because when I was young, all I was interested in was pop and soul. I didn't really know what jazz was. I thought it was people playing the saxophone and forgetting the tune and making it up. That's what I thought jazz was. So I had no idea. So he said, I'm going to put you on at Ronnie's. You're going to play opposite, which is the term they use, which is basically in pop, we call it the support act, for a New York sax player called Chico Freeman. And I started doing jazz, because the reason being was because I asked to be extricated from my recording contract, because I was very unhappy. I didn't want to be with them anymore. I needed to get away and start again, in a way. And I kind of did. And so the thing about jazz is it's about the performance, not the product. So jazz is all about playing live. The jazz artists obviously do make records, but it's mainly about the live performance. So I threw myself in at the deep end, and I was turning up at wine bars in London. And at the time, I was really very famous. And I look back and I think, God, I don't know how I had the nerve to do that. I was turning up in these wine bars where I knew a few musicians, and I'd get up and sing some standards, because I needed to learn how to sing these songs. You can't just suddenly go from pop and go, well, I'm going to be a jazz singer now. You've got to I had to sort of earn my chops, or learn my chops, or improve my chops being my talent, my singing, And so when you're singing a song like My Funny Valentine, it, it's not none of them are easy, uh, and also they're very different, because of the chord progressions and everything. Some of them can be very challenging, but also what's great about them is a song like My Funny Valentine. You can sing it different every single night if you like. It's like being on a big football pitch, and I'll kick the ball over there today. Now I'm going to kick it over there. Now I'm going to score a goal. It's kind of like that, and that's what I learned. And I learned more about lyrics and about expressing myself. And I found it. I'm not going to say I found it easy. I didn't find it easy. It was challenging, but it was. Um, I had a talent for it. I knew that I did. I was able to do that. And when you sing a song, and Bruce Springsteen says this about when he sings the songs that he writes, you become the actor in that song. So he'll be singing a song, and sometimes he's got a real twang of an accent, and it's not really his accent. He's using that accent to put across the song and what the song's about and who the person is who's singing it. And that person isn't Bruce. It's a character. And so you are a character when you sing, with parts of yourself in it, your own experiences, of a broken heart or loss or bereavement and things like that. But you're also the person acting out. So there's a lot of stuff going
Yeah.
on. But the phrasing, I think I was always quite good at it. But it was the jazz that really trained me. It was like I did it for like 10 years. I was playing at Ronnie's and doing jazz festivals and things, for 10 solid years. So I think that's a long answer to your question about right about now. But
it's the perfect length answer for many reasons, because you're talking my language there. And I say this, I've tried to get through one of the shows without mentioning Frank Sinatra. It's not going to happen today. To me, he's the god. And when you sing, and the world and the wind is throwing its weight around, that's there's something in that just sounds right, and that blew me away when I heard it. I was in Saratoga, couldn't sleep because the next day I was being made a citizen, and I got up to go to the bathroom. I'm laughing because I'm so excited, and I'm listening to your whole album, and I'm listening to the other song, like "Don't Get Me Wrong," like. That's like a completely different song, how you do it. And Be My Baby.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's poetry. Her lyrics are fantastic. And it's the same with a lot of songs. When you, and I don't believe in this whole thing of slowing everything down, but sometimes, it becomes a bit more heartfelt and a bit more tender. I think, don't get me wrong, the way we did it. But on my latest album, which is called Pop Deluxe, I did a version of 24 Hours from Tulsa. Now, all the versions, because Dusty did it, that's why. But also Gene Pitney had a big hit with it. Lots of people have covered it, and it's always been very, very up-tempo and very happy. But if you listen to the lyrics, it's a really sad story. It's awful, actually, what this woman does to this guy. She basically is away, stops at the services on the motorway and shags somebody else, and then tries to leave her husband. That's basically what happens. But it's very sad. And when I play it live, I call it my Judi Dench moment, because we slowed it right down. I mean, it's really slow. And it's almost, I mean, I'm singing, but it's almost like I'm speaking. And when I perform it, people come up to me, and one of the most common things people say is, "Oh my God, I've never listened to the lyrics until now, until you sang it tonight." And I thought, God, what a shame, really, that. And it's, I mean, it is written by, of course, somebody called Burt Bacharach, which is
some guy, some kind of unknown songwriter, yeah.
Been married 48 times, yeah. But so it's quite interesting. I write as well, but I think you can only become a good writer if you've sung lots of other great writers' songs. That's how you learn to write yourself, And so Don't Get Me Wrong and Be My Baby as well. Because I've always thought, if you're going to cover a song, don't do it the way it was done before. You can go and buy that one. In fact, I got really annoyed with Phil Collins when he did You Can't Hurry Love. Because I thought, He's done it exactly the same way as the Supremes, because what happens is it interferes with your memory. So now I can't really hear You Can't Hurry Love by the Supremes because it reminds me of Phil Collins.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? Whereas
100%.
if you do completely differently, then that one is safe. You know, the original is safe, and people either like what you've done with it or they don't. But at least you're not ruining the original, hopefully, for people, you know?
I agree with you. I agree, Mary. It's like when people do biopic movies. The best one I've seen in a long time is we had. Oh shit! Real. It was inevitable. All right, so we just decided, you know, we're gonna go with that. What you just saw, the power outage that Jessica called. She said we might have a power outage today. She was right. We did, but you know what we thought about? Will we seam it and mix it together and try to hide it? No. We said, let's just show it as it is, because we think it's brilliant and we think it's funny.
That's what happens when you have a show right in the middle of a huge windstorm.
Exactly, which you could probably hear. I think you could hear the rain. So we spoke to Mary, and this is now the next day, and we decided, let's wear the same clothes and pretend it's the same interview, even though we're telling you it's not, but it is. Anyway, thanks for tuning into part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. Driving along, minding my own business, heading east through the Kentucky rain. There on the radio, Johnny Cash was singing. I heard myself just to see if I still feel pain. All along, my head was ringing. There